You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Charles Lewis and Maxilia Robinson. Only on 101 Jams.
So Sheriff Brown, so when we look at a lot of the hot button topics, the public outcry here nationally, and of course even locally, I'm sure you've probably heard some very strong opinions about it. Can you give us your opinion as being thoroughly educated within the law of some of these situations? Whether it's Cleveland, whether it's what happened in Florida, what happened in New York, wherever the case is. Kind of break down to us where you see where the officers could have de-escalated it to save a life versus the civilian maybe being a little overzealous and not respecting the law officer.
Well, I mean, there are different ways departments handle things. They have different types of training. The training I had was really, it was focused on de-escalation techniques. Those are things that I learned also with doing the crisis intervention. And as a trainer, I was training other officers on those de-escalation techniques. But the thing is, the officer has a lot of discretion. Okay, and discretion meaning that, there could be two cars that run a stop sign. They may go after one and not go after the other. And then once they do stop the car, are they going to give them a warning or are they going to give them a ticket? And so that kind of varies, by officer. You have some officers say, they'll go after every single car, but obviously, they can't get to every car, every time. But it's, there's that discretion there in regards to whether they even have that initial interaction with law enforcement. And if they, once they do have that interaction with law enforcement, it's the de-escalation techniques. If someone's upset, and, when I would give tickets and, I still will, if I see you passing school buses and things like that, we don't monitor speed or anything like that with the sheriff's office in the city. But, it's one of those things that, I expect people to be upset, when you stop them and take away their freedom of traveling, for a traffic infraction, especially if they don't know it. Sometimes folks are, speeding, they know they're speeding and it's kind of like, I need to slow down. But, people are going to be upset, so you have to use those de-escalation techniques. And, when I've seen some of the videos from things that are going around, in other places across the country, I can't Monday morning quarterback their situation. But from what I've seen, I think that, better communication, more de-escalation techniques, things of that nature, with some of them, were there lethal, were there non-lethal alternatives in dealing with some of the things. Yeah, and
particularly when we're talking about a minor, for instance, one of the thoughts is if it's a minor or someone with, even with, a disability, whatever the case is the law officer, should they be looked at as the more responsible party, so to speak? That is an argument that I've heard, is that, like they should be the ones that's trained, to de-escalate the situation. Not necessarily that civilian, particularly, when we talk about the issues that happen with some of our teenagers. So do you feel like that more of the onus falls on that officer?
Well, I mean, that kind of varies because when you say minor, there's a difference between a 17-year-old and a 7-year-old. Mm-hmm. You can tell a kid's 7 or, really young, but, there are teenagers out there that are, bigger, taller than me. And if, I don't know how old they are, it's when you get close enough and you can kind of, look in someone's face, you can kind of tell, that they're, a bit younger or whatever. But, that comes to being able to communicate, being able to de-escalate situations regardless of the age. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that ability to communicate with people of all ages and you don't have that ability to de-escalate situations, you arrive somewhere and things get worse, that's not a good thing there.
Let me ask you, so what type of behavior, so to speak, could be deemed as threatening to law enforcement? Because you have some people, teenagers, whatnot, that say, he reacted with force or maybe drew his gun, etc., way too fast. I always pull my ball cap off and put it back on my head. I always walk around with my hands in my pockets. I was reaching in my jacket for a cigarette. Like, I know you said law enforcement has a large amount of discretion, but sometimes I don't think that the public recognizes when they're doing something that causes that law enforcement officer to have to draw his gun or use that force.
All right. Well, I mean, and that's one of the things. If you're an officer and they're like, hey, I need to keep your hands out your pocket. Mm-hmm. That's kind of one of the big things. Officers like to see hands. Mm-hmm. Because a hand is what can hold a gun, a hand is what can hold a knife, a hand is what can hold a weapon. If you're making a fist and they see that, then it's like, okay, this person may be getting ready
Seems threatening.
Right. And so that's one of the big things is just if your hands are visible and empty, that is one thing that an officer would look at. But if someone keeps reaching into a pocket or reaching behind them or reaching into a jacket or whatever, you don't know what all is there.
A personal question for me is whether or not you think body cameras will work. Personally, I don't think they will. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, you see a lot of things that are caught on dash camera video, and officers aren't punished for them. And so, I'm like, okay, if it's being recorded, then and the judge or whomever can see it, whoever it is that they answer to, can see their actions and they're still not, punished for it, then what's the point? Why are we pushing dash cameras? Why are we pushing body cameras when many officers still walk away from what they've done?
Right. Well, one of the things I look at with the cameras is basically a person's action and how they do things. They form habits. And so if they have a body camera and they, are someone that hasn't been doing the right thing, that's going to end up coming up on the camera. Mm-hmm. It may not be the first month of the first year, but if they have bad habits of not doing the right thing, mm-hmm. they're going to go back and resort to that whether the camera's on them or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that may be, with dash cams, all the officers have cameras, have in-car cameras, and so they just go about doing what they do.
Right.
But one of the other things is often there's you don't see what leads up to this traffic stop, or you don't see what leads up to this interaction mm-hmm. type thing. Mm-hmm. And so really that's really just, what the media will give you, sometimes may not be the whole video of things. But, if there's officers that are not doing the right thing, they'll continue to not do the right thing and it'll end up showing up. Mm-hmm. And if not, then, it would have curbed what their behaviors and their interactions.
I know that you say you like to make sure you keep open communication with the people that you serve. Is that the only way that you try to create that mutual respect, or how do you restore it, maintain it, however you want to word it? I saw a recent video where it was probably either a police officer or a school resource officer smacking a kid in the hallway, and then another officer that was with him watching. So as a parent, when you see things like that, you lose faith, So how do you make sure that your community can still trust you?
Well, again, for me, I think communication is a key. If you have a friendship that goes bad for some reason and you all just stop talking to each other and you don't deal with each other, that's kind of what happened. But you can't do that if you're in law enforcement because you will still have the same, folks to talk to and try to work with in the community. You can't just say, all right, well, I'm not going to go on that block anymore because I don't like some of the residents there. Right. Or I'm not going to interact with so-and-so. It's still part of the community, and because of that, you still need to be able to communicate with people you like and don't like. Mm-hmm. For me, just with my position, there are folks that, don't care for law enforcement, but, I still talk to folks, and I'll tell them who I am, what I'm about, and right. find out who they are and what they are about,
right.
and we'll have conversations.
Okay. All right. So can you give me your personal opinion on how you and your team, if you could speak for everyone, feels or reacts to the way law enforcement is viewed nationally as being the bad guy?
Well, I mean, for me and for most of the folks I know, it's disheartening. Mm-hmm. And it's because we care about the community and we are out there trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things folks say, a bad apple will spoil the bunch. Mm-hmm. well, you may have a bad apple, but it doesn't mean all the other apples are bad. And so, so for me, it's one of the things I let folks know, hey, we're going through a period where, law enforcement isn't, viewed in a positive light. And, with me and my age, my father was in his 20s in the 60s when they had, riots and things of that nature. And when you look at those civil rights times and what's been going on, and, there have been things that have been going on in the communities ever since then. Okay. And so, today it's kind of more in the spotlight again. But, yeah, it's not everybody is the same. And as being a young black man growing up, you'll hear people say things about black males, and there's more black males in jail and prison than getting an education and all this. So before I got into law enforcement, I had these kinds of negative stereotypes or just generalizations about me. And then after being in law enforcement, you still have the same thing. All cops are crooked, all cops are bad, and it's not the case. But it's the ones that are getting in trouble are the ones that are getting the attention. Right. And so it makes the rest of the folks who are just out there doing their job, they stay low key. Depending on what your position is in a department, a lot of times you're not in a position to be able to interact with the public in regards to media and things like that. So yeah, it kind of varies, but it's disheartening to see how folks and are getting along in the communities, and law enforcement is part of the community.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion. Our guest for this segment is Sheriff James Brown. This is Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. We'll be right back.
All right. Well, there's an organization called NOBLE. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's a National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and I'm a member of NOBLE. And they have a program they've been doing called The Law on You. And one of the times they really like to do that program is towards the late spring, because that's when the kids are going to get out for the summer. And so basically, 7 days a week, for 2-3 months, the kids are kind of out and they're not in school. So it's, you just want to make sure that the kids are staying safe and that they're doing things they're supposed to do. But it also helps the kids understand, how to interact with law enforcement, because when you're interacting with law enforcement, there are things that law enforcement has been trained to look for and trained to do. And when people don't understand that, it ends up, creating some tension. One of the things is kids like to walk around and have their hands down in the pockets. Law enforcement does not like hands in pockets because they can't see if there's a weapon in there. Because, people will carry a small firearm in their pockets and a waistband, so they like to see hands. And, there have been times where, we've been at, dealing with some disorder or something's going on and someone keeps putting their hands in the pocket. So then it's like, okay, well, now we got to pat this person down to make sure they don't have a weapon. And then, you say, hey, just keep your hands out your pockets and, you can kind of continue on with what's going on. But, you have tension there because folks understand, well, there's nothing in my pockets, so what's the problem? Right, and, so that's when, an officer may pat someone down to make sure that they're safe or they don't have any type of weapons or anything on them. So it's, it's just kind of varies as to, those interactions and understanding one another in regards to the interaction. Yeah,
and those resources are very important. I'm definitely an advocate for that, and I hope that we can reach our audience as far as making them aware of any programs that that we can definitely promote to help our young people with the relationship with their law enforcement. I think I'm correct in assessing that what I'm hearing is coming from an African American male, as you stated, and you've had some life experiences to help formulate that opinion and that stance. So what do you think could help in these in these relationships as far as it being more of an understanding, and for us to even hopefully ultimately that would reduce the disproportionate rate of our African American males being in prison and things of that sort, as far as that balance. Of course it's the self-control and the taking care of oneself initially, but when it comes to these stories though of there being overzealous law officers and things of that sort, I guess the deeper matter of that? Do you feel like that it's more of a community issue as far as hiring the right people, or is it just a clash of cooler heads have to prevail? What's your thoughts?
It's a combination of things that go beyond law enforcement. It's the system itself. The system itself is a main contributor in employment, education. There are a lot of things that lead people into situations that end up being illegal. But it's one of those things that it's for me, I want to say almost law enforcement knows almost a reaction to the things that are going on. If that makes any sense to you. It's like police don't show up ahead of time, before something happens. In general, it's pretty reactive, but it's just different things that are going on in the system. And I mean the system, I mean by the criminal justice system, I mean education. Kids need to be in school. Employment opportunities. If you don't have your education, you decrease your employment opportunities, you close doors. There are a lot of things that end up leading to the situations where it ends up, that folks are having involvement with law enforcement. And it's, often, you'll have, people in neighborhoods call because they see something going on. Law enforcement officer comes in, and that's, when you have that interaction. But, I think being able to communicate, getting out and talking to people when you're not there, for a service call, or you're not there because something's wrong, you're there interacting with the people, getting to know the people in the neighborhood. Because a lot of times,
that's important.
A lot of times the folks that you deal with in the neighborhood, or a lot of folks you don't deal with in the neighborhood, are not there during the day because they're out working or doing what they need to do to put food on the table. And so you don't have the interaction with the folks that are, staying on the right track and doing the right things. You end up having to, respond to calls to the neighbors when they call and say, oh, this person's doing this or this is going on. And so those are the folks that you end up dealing with mostly. All right, well, we're involved with Triad. Triad is a program that's between law enforcement and senior citizens, and it's trying to help senior citizens prevent them from being victims of crime. So we go over frauds and scams. And there's a ton of those. That's a whole nother show. Okay. Online things and mailings and phone calls. One of the big phone calls that people start getting now is the IRS call. This is the IRS calling you need to pay us, $1,000, or we're going to have someone come arrest you. Yeah. That one has kind of taken a different angle because people can use apps on their phones. So when they call you, it'll come up that an IRS number, or it comes up as the sheriff's office or the police department calling you. Yeah. They can mask their phone number. Mm-hmm. So what we've found has been going on recently is people will use, calls, say they're, with the IRS, and then if the person doesn't, respond or whatever, they want a Visa card with green dot prepaid cards. A half hour later, they'll get another phone call, and this time it comes up that it's with a law enforcement agency. Wow. And so they're doing both to make the people think, oh my goodness, the IRS did call. But the Triad program, we work with seniors. The RAD program, self-defense class. Well, the RAD program's for women. Self-defense is for all the community. We go into the schools and do bullying presentations. And we work with the youth, primarily in the elementary schools for that. We work with Sarah and UVA to do some of the self-defense classes. We haven't done a joint one together for a while, but Sarah is another good resource. And again, with the sheriff's office, we're available anytime anyone wants us to come speak to groups, to discuss things, we're there and we can do that.
Yeah. So how can our listeners get in touch with your office and maybe, find the links to some of these resources? All
right. Well, the easiest way, you can email me, and it's basically sheriff, SHERIFF, sheriff at Charlottesville.org. Okay. That's the email address to get to me. And then you can call the office. It's 434-970-3777. And that's the phone number to the office. So either of those, will get to me, and then, you can let me know what it is you're looking for, and I can try to get you directed to the correct place.
Okay. Is there a direct website link that they can type in and get to you?
Well, if you go to charlottesville.org, okay. We're listed under the sheriff's office, one of the departments in the city.
Good.
Okay. Well, Sheriff Brown, I appreciate your time and thanks for all that you do. And it's been a lot of insightful information that you've given. I'm sure the community appreciates it and hopefully learned something new. But thank you again for your time for visiting In My Humble Opinion.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Sure. This is Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis on In My Humble Opinion with Sheriff Brown.